Never plug in a solar panel expecting the power company to just let you walk away. That's the mistake a lot of homeowners make. They think less electricity used means a smaller bill, maybe even freedom from the power company altogether. But across the country, people are cutting their electricity use, adding solar panels, buying batteries, and still opening bills that barely budge. Some of them go up. And that's not a mistake on the bill. It's how the system is built. So today we're going to break down something most people never think about until it hits their mailbox. Why does the American power grid need you to stay connected, even if you barely use it? Why do some states charge solar homeowners extra fees just for having their own power? And is this actually about keeping the lights on for everyone? Or is it about protecting a business model that was built almost 100 years ago? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what your electric bill is really paying for, why cutting your usage doesn't always cut your costs, and what's coming next for anyone who wants real independence from the grid. Let's get into it. Here's where this starts. A homeowner in Arizona puts solar panels on their roof. Over the next year, they cut their grid electricity use by almost 80%. They're feeling pretty good about it. Then the bill comes. It's not 80% lower. In some cases, it's barely lower at all. There's a new fixed charge on there, a minimum bill amount, maybe a demand charge based on the highest few hours they pulled power that month. The homeowner calls the utility, confused, maybe a little angry. And the answer they get sounds almost backwards. You're still connected to the grid. You still have to pay for that. This isn't a scam. It isn't a random fee some utility invented to punish people for going green. It's the result of a decades-old system running into a problem nobody designed it to handle. And once you understand that system, the whole thing makes a lot more sense, even if you still don't like it. Let's talk about what an electric bill actually pays for, because most people get this wrong. You'd think you're paying for electricity. Kilowatt hours, plain and simple. But that's only part of it. Your bill is also paying for the power plants that generate electricity, the transmission lines that carry it hundreds of miles, the substations and transformers that step it down so it doesn't fry your house, the poles and wires running down your street, the meter on the side of your home, the workers who fix downed lines during a storm at 2 a.m, the billing systems, the customer service lines, the trucks, the maintenance crews. None of that is free, and almost all of it has to exist, whether you use a lot of power or almost none. Now here's the part that changes everything. Most residential electric rates in America are built around something called volumetric pricing. That's a fancy way of saying you get charged per kilowatt hour. The more you use, the more you pay. Sounds fair on the surface. But the problem is, a huge chunk of the cost of running the grid isn't tied to how much electricity you personally use in a given month. It's tied to just having the system exist and be ready for you at all times. Think of it like a gym membership that only charges you based on how many times you show up, but the gym still has to pay rent on the building, keep the lights on, and maintain every machine, whether one person uses it or 200 people use it. If everyone suddenly starts going less, the gym doesn't lower its rent. It still has to pay for the building. So what happens? The gym either raises prices for the people still coming in, or it starts charging a membership fee just to keep the doors open, regardless of how often you show up. That's basically what's happening with electricity. When a home cuts its power use by installing solar panels or upgrading to more efficient appliances, the utility sells fewer kilowatt hours. But the poles, wires, substations, and power plants don't get cheaper to maintain just because fewer electrons are flowing through them. Someone still has to pay for all of that. And if the people using less power are paying less into the system, the math has to balance out somewhere. This is where things start to get uncomfortable, because now we're talking about who picks up the difference. Let's put some real numbers on this, because it's not just theory. The average American household paid around $144 a month for electricity in 2024. In some states, that number was well over $200, and state regulators approved close to $10 billion in net rate increases in 2023 alone, more than double what was approved the year before. A lot of that money is going toward things like wildfire protection, storm hardening, and aging infrastructure that's been running for decades longer than it was built for. At the same time, utilities are spending more and more on the distribution system, the local wires and substations that actually get power to your house. Spending on that part of the grid hit over $6 billion in 2023, up 15% from the year before, and it's grown by more than 180% over the last 20 years. That spending isn't stopping because more people are installing solar panels. If anything, it's increasing, because the grid now has to handle power flowing in both directions instead of just one. So now you've got two things happening at the same time. Grid costs are going up. And in some areas, the amount of electricity utilities are selling is growing more slowly, or in certain pockets, even shrinking, because of solar and efficiency. When those two lines cross, someone has to make a decision about how the bills get split up. This is where the fight starts. And there are two sides, and both of them have a point. On one side, you've got the utilities and the regulators who work with them. Their argument goes like this. A home with solar panels still needs the grid. At night, when the sun isn't shining, that home pulls power just like everyone else. During a heat wave, When everyone's air conditioner is running at the same time, the grid has to be built to handle that peak moment, even if it only happens a few days a year. That capacity has to exist year-round, fully staffed, fully maintained, ready to go, even though it might only get pushed to its limit a handful of times. A solar home that barely buys any electricity over the course of a year can still show up during that one brutal July evening and pull just as much power as anyone else. If that home isn't paying its fair share toward keeping the system ready for that moment, the utility argues, then someone else has to cover the gap. And that someone else is usually the customer who doesn't have solar. Someone renting an apartment. Someone who can't afford panels. Someone whose roof faces the wrong direction or is shaded by trees. That's a real concern, and it's backed up by actual research. One image worth mentioning here is income. Homeowners who installed solar in 2023 had a median household income of about $115,000, compared to around $75,000 for the average American household. So if the cost of maintaining the grid gets pushed more and more onto lower income households who can't install solar, that's a fairness problem, a real one. Now, here's the other side of the argument, and it's just as legitimate. Solar and battery owners say the utility math is incomplete. Yes, a solar home still uses the grid, but that home is also giving something back. During the day, when solar panels are producing the most power, that's often when demand is high too, especially in hot climates where air conditioners are running through the afternoon. Solar panels can take pressure off the grid during exactly the hours when it's most stressed. That can delay the need for new power plants. It can reduce how much fuel a utility has to burn. It can even reduce how much electricity gets lost as it travels down long transmission lines, because the power is being generated closer to where it's used. So when a utility says, this house is costing us money because they're not buying as much power, solar advocates push back and say, you're only counting what you lost. You're not counting what you saved. And that's a fair criticism. $1 of lost revenue from unsold electricity isn't automatically the same as $1 of real cost to the system. Sometimes it's close. Sometimes it's not even close. This brings us to something researchers have actually studied directly. A study out of Berkeley Lab looked at what happens to rates when solar adoption reaches around 5% of a utility's customers. And the answer wasn't one clean number. Depending on the assumptions, depending on the state, depending on how the utility compensates solar owners for the power they send back to the grid, the impact on everyone else's rates ranged from a 5% decrease to a 5% increase. Let that sink in for a second. The exact same policy, in different places, under different conditions, can either lower everyone's bill or raise it. There is no single, universal answer here. Anyone who tells you solar always raises rates, or solar always lowers rates, is skipping the actual research. Now here's where this whole story takes a turn a lot of people don't expect. For years, the entire fight has been framed as houses versus the grid. Solar owners trying to escape the system, utilities trying to keep them paying into it. But that framing is starting to become outdated, because federal regulators have started treating homes not as a threat to the grid, but as a potential resource for it. In 2020, a federal order came down that changed how small, distributed energy sources are allowed to participate in the wider electricity market. Home batteries, rooftop solar, smart thermostats, even electric vehicles can now be grouped together and sold as a kind of virtual power plant. Instead of one house with solar panels being seen as a smaller customer, thousands of houses with batteries and smart devices can be bundled together and act almost like their own power plant, one that can respond fast, reduce strain during peak hours, and get paid for doing it. This is the twist in the story. The grid isn't just trying to keep you as a customer who buys electricity. Increasingly, it's trying to figure out how to use your home as a supplier. Your battery, your solar panels, your smart thermostat that can shift your air conditioning by 20 minutes during a heat wave. All of that has value to the grid, real, measurable value, and the rules are slowly shifting to let homeowners get paid for providing it, instead of just being billed for using it. So where does this leave things right now? The truth is, there's no clean, satisfying answer, and anyone who gives you one is probably leaving something out. The grid does not literally need every household glued to old habits of high electricity use. What it needs is a stable, fair way to pay for infrastructure that has to be ready at all times, for everyone, even during the worst weather of the year. Right now, a lot of that cost gets baked into the price of each kilowatt hour you buy. And when people buy less, whether through efficiency, solar, or batteries, that funding model starts to crack. Utilities aren't wrong to worry about that gap. But solar owners aren't wrong either when they say some of what they provide back to the grid isn't being counted fairly. The real fight happening in state capitals across the country right now isn't about whether solar is good or bad. It's about how to redesign the pricing system so it actually reflects what people use, what people give back, and what it really costs to keep the lights on for 130 million American homes. If you own solar panels, or you're thinking about it, this is exactly why you need to look past the average savings number and understand your specific utility's rate structure, because the answer is different in every state, sometimes even in every zip code. If this kind of breakdown helped you understand what's actually going on with your power bill, subscribe, because we're going deeper into the hidden systems running your daily life.